Okay, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, and welcome everybody to the January meeting on the 26th for the West Perth Police Services Board, starting at 9:01 a.m. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we would start with looking for someone to motion to confirm today's agenda. Motion by Paul, seconded by Walter. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Is there anyone that has to disclose pecuniary interest today? Seeing nothing. Move on to item 4, confirmation of the adoption of the minutes from our previous meeting from November 24th, 2021. June? Is that a motion, June? Okay, sorry. And seconded by John. Thank you. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We'll move on. I don't believe we have any delegations for today, so we'll go to correspondence. The OPP annual billing overview webinar was held. I don't know if anyone joined in on that or not. I attended most of it. It skipped in and out a bit on the internet for me. There was lots of information there. What else do we have? There was also a zone meeting in December. June, were you on that? No. I did try to hook up to it. They had a lot of internet trouble during that meeting. The links were confused. People didn't know what links to use. We missed pretty much 3/4 of the entire thing.
Yeah, we had a funeral that day.
So it was difficult to get through it, but there was a little bit of information I gleaned from it. So the CSPA is basically on hold, and likely we won't see any activity on that part until after the election, is the way it sounded. And the new board or detachment board system won't be starting anytime soon, is what they said. Am I correct with that information, Jason or Wendy?
Yeah, Councillor Harold, until the CPSA goes through, we won't see any movement with the one county, one board. So we're sort of in a holding pattern until that occurs.
Okay. So we can move on to item 7, which is, oh, I'm sorry, under correspondence, we could have the progress report if, Wendy, is that yours?
Yeah, it's the progress report is just being shared with the board. So it's our annual report back to let you know what we've accomplished in our plan for 2020 to 2022. So this one is actually the 2020 report back. We were delayed due to several different issues with putting it forward, but in all our areas, we've got relevant activity underway for traffic, property crime, and for our community response. So if there's anything specific, maybe we can address it after the other detachment commander's report that Jason does, and then we can talk a little bit more, if you want, about how we're planning to do some more of our progress reports for the 2021 updates and what the focus is that we've got going for our detachment in the next year.
Okay, great, that sounds good, thank you. I think we just received that as information under correspondence, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So item number 7, reports.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. Sorry
Yes.
to interrupt.
Yep.
The OPP are obligated to give us their 3 or 5 year plan. that's an obligation by legislation. So that's what this is, okay?
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, item number 7, reports. Sergeant McTaggart.
Great, thanks, Mr. Harold. So regarding the police service board reports for November, first of all, I want to wish everyone a happy new year. And I hope that 2022 is not a repeat of 2021. I'm very optimistic it won't be. But again, we're early on, so we will see what the future holds. So getting on to reports, the November report. The calls for service, obviously you're at 372. We're up from 2020, which as everybody knows was a bit of a strange year for us all. Just a little bit higher than 2019, which is more of a reflection of where we were at prior to COVID. So as you know, municipality of West Perth is growing, so there's an indication that our calls for service will increase as well. Going down to our hours, patrol hours, 267, foot patrol just over 12, school patrol at 10, and we did have some mobilization hours at 11. Our ride hours just shy of 50, auxiliary hours are at 58, and we did have one COVID-related call for service. So moving on to our initiatives, media releases. We did have 23 media releases for the County of Perth, 5 of which were directly related to West Perth. And I just wanted to verify, there's a few members on the board that I have continued to send media releases to. June, you are one, as well as John. Are you continuing to receive those releases I'm sending you? Yep, okay, great, thank you. Moving on to our traffic and crime campaigns. This is regarding the collisions. We had 22 for the month of November, 18 of which were property damage and 2 personal injuries. And unfortunately, sad to report, we did have 1 fatal morbid collision. And majority of the property damage calls for service involved deer. So that time of year, obviously deer are very much in their rut, and that would account for some of that. As for the driving, you can tell we have 4 impaired driving incidents for the month of November, and that goes to show our good work by our members on the front line here in West Perth. And then this also November, middle of the month, kicked off our Festive Ride campaign, which ran through until January of this year. Constable Johnson, our school resource officer, completed the kids program at Upper Thames, and she continues to do her morning discussions. One of them is on the ranch once a week, and just getting out those different campaigns and messaging that we want for the public. So she's doing a great job there as well. Crime Stoppers tips, we did have 9 intelligence tips for the month of November, and our auxiliary program is still very much active, and they are continuing to do their meetings in person in November, and we did have 4 of those members of our unit did resign due to other commitments they did have. We are proceeding presently with the application stage to move forward to hire some more auxiliary members. And the SEPTED program, we did use one of those in one of our recent thefts, which is a program, as you know, to educate the homeowner on what they can do to better secure and monitor their business or residence. Our continuing learning is continuing with us regarding our training, and just moving down to our engagement piece there. The school officer, aka Joe Johnson, did have 3 calls for service at the high school here in Mitchell in November. We did have an issue regarding some inappropriate photo being circulated around on the young person Snapchat program, which is obviously very popular with the younger folks. And she's very much engaged with that and looking after that investigation. So Part of her messaging as well is to educate the youth on the appropriate use of social media, because as you know, once you send a photo out, it's out there for everyone to see forever. Our community mobilization officer, Bill DeConing, participated in 5 mental health calls for service here in West Perth for the month of November. We had 3 in October, so we were up 2 and up 1 from the same time from 2020. Peace Coning, again, I can't say enough great things about his work and his engagement with mental health and getting the messaging and the proper assistance our frontline needs in order to address this ever increasing pressure we have here on our front line. Obviously, we that's for December, but it's captured in November before. We need to have a drive-through Santa Claus parade on December 4th, but that was just captured here in November. Noteworthy occurrences. We did have an unwanted party at a residence here in West Perth that assaulted the homeowner and using I believe an iron, and then damaged the car with a sledgehammer. So they were obviously arrested and charged. And as you can tell, this is some crazy events are happening for us here, but our frontline members did a great job at making sure that the appropriate people are dealt with accordingly. And then we did have a vehicle stop resulting in the seizure of some methamphetamines as well as Percocets, which, as you know, opioids are very much a factor in a prevalent piece seen by our frontline as well as our public members. So regarding trends, we did have an increase in violent crime, specifically assaults. I'll speak to that a little later when I get to the weighted hours for service. But that, as you will see, is we correlated that. I spoke to Acting Inspector Burrow about this, and we correlated this to a lot of individuals are self-isolating. They're seeing a lot more of each other. And I think the pressures of COVID and the restrictions in place are having an impact on our the public, such that tempers and frustrations are growing, and we're seeing an increase in assaults, not stranger assaults, but amongst people who know one another. So that we spoke to later on as well. Again, lock it and lose it, obviously, is a big piece for us, and we continue to message that piece out. It's a hard message to send to some of the local folks that have been around for years and years and years to lock those trucks, put away your keys from those tractors and whatnot. It just can't reinforce that enough. So moving on just to the collisions regarding last year and increases. So in November, we did see a slight increase from last year, but overall we were still down. That's, in my opinion, it's good news that we are doing enough on the front line to still keep our traffic collisions down. And then all right, so let me move forward here to speak to the violent crime trends. Assaults and sexual assaults obviously are still are what's leading our increase in our weighted hours. And we have seen an increase in both. And like I said earlier, our explanation on that has to go with the isolation, the restrictions, where everybody is seeing a lot more of each other. And some of us can handle that in a good way. And then some of us, obviously, that has a great impact on our well-being and the way our behavior indicates. So that would account for a lot of our increase in our weighted hours regarding our trends. So we do our best to educate victims on the resources and services available to them. And I sit on the Stop Violence Against Women Committee from the OPP here in Perth County. And do what we can to message out the resources in place for our victims so that they're not being re-victimized in the future. So moving ahead with that as well here. The recoverable expenses, I believe everything is on par here. I don't think there's any errors or mistakes here. Please let me know if you do see something. And the false alarm report, we only had 3 for the month of November. Only one of them was attended by our members. The 2 were canceled prior to our arrival. Not an issue there at all. And then again, then we get into the weighted hours. So the very last page with the total of 6712.5 versus 4885.4 from 2020. Again, I think I spoke to those increases and where those were identified, and we do advocate for those issues, but they are very much social issues that are somewhat beyond our abilities to impact. But definitely, we can definitely message out the appropriate measures in place to assist these individuals so that they're not being re-victimized over and over again. Any questions about the November report at all? No?
Jason?
Oh, go ahead, Paul.
So, and it's just a data thing, and I just don't quite understand it, and it might be me. So when I look back, like page 6, which is like motor vehicle collisions by type, as an example. So there we show in 2020 under the fatal, not picking on any one thing, under fatal, it shows 0 in 2020. It shows 2 in 2021 in the month of November. I think you reported 1, not sure how that goes. Percentage of change shows 0, which is affecting your statistics moving forward because you're suggesting that everything is, you know, only a 6.8% or 6.1% increase in November. Overall, we're down 6.2. You only use that as one example, and maybe again, it's just me and I'm not quite, but if you go down, and again, I was just looking at the data as you went through it, Jason, under the murder section, which was the next one, I mean, we show 1 in 2021, 0 in 2020, percentage of change is 0. A percentage of change is flat. There's nothing in that field. So just not sure on the data integrity if we're using this to make decisions as it relates to the detachment. And you can kind of see that same thing throughout the report a little bit, like jumping down to drug crime trafficking, same issue, 0 in 2024 and 2021. That changes flat or 0. So maybe just push that back to Sean or somebody who's dealing with the data.
Thanks, Paul. Wendy, do you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah, I noticed that too as we were going through the report. So these reports are sort of self-generated by our system, and there's obviously something that's going wrong because the percentage change isn't accurate. So I'll reach out to our data management group and just ask them if they can take a look into this program. This report here isn't what your billing goes by. It sort of gives us, it's supposed to give us some of the trends. The billing is actually the calls for service billing report. So, but I appreciate that, and we'll take a look into it, figure out why it's not. And I noticed the December report's the same. The percentage change isn't there. So I'll follow up on that and get back to you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy. Thanks, Paul. Other than that, we're good for November, board. Okay. I'll move ahead to December. Okay, speaking to our call for service, 292, slight increase from 2019, and an increase from 2020, obviously, for the same reasons I just spoke about before. Cruise patrol hours at 321, school patrol at 16 and a half, school patrol hours at 7.75, and this has to do with partially the school break as well as COVID, because COVID has impacted our school resource officers being in the classroom as well. Focus patrol hours at 4.5. Mobilization hours at 22. Ride at 45. Auxiliary hours are 81. We did have that food drive in Mitchell here. And the COVID-related calls were at 2. So I know for 2021, obviously our COVID-related call service are slowly coming down as the year went on. Just, you know, various restrictions in place by the province, obviously, that dictated what restrictions the individuals and businesses required to abide by. So we didn't see a huge spike in December. Our media releases, 29 releases for the county in December. And regarding our crime and traffic campaigns, 15 collisions noted for West Perth in December, 13 of which were property damage and 2 personal injury. Again, here is a factor in some of the collisions here as well. Speaking to some of the issues we've seen here, we saw 3 stunt drives, which is a proactive effort by our members here as well, slow down our motoring public, which speaks to our traffic plan that we generated at the beginning of the year to try to impact stunt driving here as well. So that goes to some good speaking there as well. As you can tell, there was only 1 individual from West Perth that was caught stunt driving. 2 of them were outside the county altogether. We did have 1 impaired driver. It had to do with drugs. The individual was arrested and charged there as well. And we did have an individual with no insurance as a result of a proactive traffic stop. They were dealt with accordingly. As you can tell, this was the 4th offense. So we're doing what we can to get these individuals before the courts. And sometimes the lesson is not learned. But again, we will still push it through, and hopefully the courts can address that one accordingly. I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of that fine. Regarding our public education campaigns, Constable Johnson did attend the anti-human traffic campaign coalition meeting in December. She also conducted some follow-up interviews regarding some steps and helped out with the spraying on the frontline members here. And she continues to have her morning discussions on the ranch, do our messaging out to the public, speak about the auxiliary food drive as well as the campaign, and basically remind individuals that are leaving their car warming up in the morning, they are at risk for theft. So that's another piece here as well. We did not have any report from Crime Stoppers for December, so we were able to report on that. Our auxiliary program continues, obviously, and I spoke for in the November report. We did have the Santa Claus drive-through parade here in Mitchell, which I understand was a good success. Again, our members were part of that as well. And yeah, so continuous learning obviously is ongoing. We did have individuals do some elder abuse training, obviously, which is a big piece here as well. And it's nice to see that we can get that our members here trained on that, because that is, as our population does get older, there is some individuals that are taking advantage of our older individuals, and we can give those individuals some assistance in training, and we're going to do that. 6 calls for service at the high school for the month of December. Missing person call, which we did end up locating, and then we're having the issue with the distribution of intimate images there as well. So our officers are definitely working towards that, as well as the resource officer, and these programs we are giving to the students at the high school, because that's where we're seeing this piece at the high school level. 4 mental health calls for service for West Perth in December, down from 5 probably from last month, and up 3 from the same time frame for 2020. Again, PC Coning is our mental team mobilization officer as well. So regarding focus patrols, I know I spoke to the board about this on our last presentation regarding Broadhaven. And I could speak to this here quickly because I did deploy our Speed Spy device for Broadhaven. And that was in November, I believe I put it up. It runs on a battery, so you get about 4 to 5 days, depending on the weather, because it's cold does obviously impact it. And the data came back as a clear issue for speeding in the village. So as a result, I generated a focus patrol and had our members. So I'll back up a little bit. With that Speed Spy, it provides a program that allows me to see the time and date of when the highest demand for speeding is. And as a result, I can put together a report that will allow us to deploy our officers in that location at appropriate times, so they're not sitting there all day and doing nothing. So I'll likely speak to this. There'll be probably more information in the January 2022 report, but I'll just quickly go over some of the numbers now because I did compile where we were at with that. So there was a total of 27 hours put towards this initiative by our members. And that includes also our time team traffic unit we have for the region. They participated in this focus patrol as well. And we generated 17 charges. So that does not include the warnings that were given out or the visibility that obviously that we're getting from our members. So our members have reported back to me that we've had a great response from the residents in the village, indicating that they were very appreciative of us doing that and being present and during that time frame. Now, this also fell to our Christmas season, so traffic wasn't as heavy as it normally would be during higher peaks time of the year. So I will likely deploy that Speed Spy again just to see if our enforcement did have a positive reflection on the motoring public going through the village. And I'll report on that at a later time. So again, I do believe this was a very effective focus patrol, and we did get some positive numbers out of that. Any questions on that one at all? Okay. So again, community events, we had the drive through Santa Claus Parade, which I spoke to you about already. The noteworthy occurrence for December we have here regarding intoxicated breaking windows. He was obviously arrested and charged, and just before the courts as we speak. So good work by our members there as well. So similar to the month of November, we are definitely seeing a trend in violent crime. Assaults, whatnot, are obviously leading our trend here for the same reasons I spoke to about the November report here as well. The collisions, obviously, we will speak to that, Paul. For the month of December, we're still down in collisions, but I know we did speak about the issue we're having with the data, but we will address that and probably report on. So, our personal injury collisions are down. Property damage collisions are still down. So I think that's still a good news piece. We need to speak to that we are doing our part as much as we can here in the valley to make sure the residents are safe and that we're not risking anyone here. Moving forth here to violent crime, if you go to the report regarding the breakdown, and you can see the assaults still obviously are leading us here. Moving over to the collected recoverable expenses. I had a look here. I didn't see any errors or omissions on this. If anybody has any questions or concerns, please let me know, but it appears to be all in order. And then we did have a few more false alarms for the month of December. We did have 6 false alarms, which we all did attend, and yeah, there was no issues. So for various reasons, the individuals are, and it's the Duracell office here in town that seems to lead our false alarms, and that probably isn't news to anybody on the board that we do see this issue with them. I know the officers, when they do attend these calls for service, do remind the company to check your sensors. A lot of times a cobweb or something like that, when a fan's blowing in the plant, that's all it takes to set that alarm off, right? So we do our best to message out to Duracell to make sure their plant, they are doing regular checks and servicing on their alarm system, so that we aren't attending unnecessarily when we could be doing other things. So I believe they're alive to that. I don't see this all the time on here from Duracell, but I know they are a frequent business we do attend for false alarms. So, and then just moving on to the billing summary report, very similar to November. When it comes to our weighted hours, at the bottom you can see it. We're totaling 7,295 versus 5,308 from 2020. And I won't just go over the justification behind that, because it's very similar to November, where 2020 was an unusual year for us, and the assaults seem to lead our numbers in the weighted hours that our members are having to conduct in order to perform those investigations and to ensure our investigative excellence in that. So, any questions about either report? Did I miss anything? Is anybody any issues other than the issue with the data there, Paul, that you raised? Jim?
Jason, I believe that we are in the last year of the current contract, which means that when the next contract comes up, we're going to be billed on the increased calls for service. And it doesn't seem much for 1 month, but consistently it's about 30 more calls a month over a period of 2 years anyway. I didn't go back the 3rd year. That actually increases us a great deal. Is that what you're seeing? And how is this going to affect West Perth?
Well, Jim,
I know that's a loaded question, Jason.
I was going to say, you don't hold back at all, please. I think the calls to service of the June with the municipality growing, and I think growth is a necessary piece for us. Our calls to service are going to increase, and I know you're going to look at years past and say, okay, well, we were at this number for 2019, or even going back 5 years ago, right? With the increased population base that we're seeing here in West Perth, the new housing, that in itself is going to contribute to the calls for service that we are seeing. And I know it's going to have an impact on the billing model, like you said, but that is something that I believe is inevitable, that we are seeing that all over at other locations here as well. And that, in a business sense, to keep the calls for service low would be great if we could do that. But some of those calls for service that are beyond our control, we are having to respond to and deal with. But I guarantee you, we are doing our very best to do proactive measures in place to prevent some of those calls for service that are somewhat in our control, if you know what I mean, regarding traffic collisions and those kind of calls for service that we're seeing, that, if you do our small piece here, it's going to have a greater effect down the road. Wendy, did you want to speak to any of that?
I think you're absolutely right, June. The calls for service last year they were down. This year they're a little bit up. But if we go back to 2018, 2017, 2018 specifically for property crime, we were looking at 265 calls for service in West Perth, and now we're at 212. So we see these trends that occur, and sometimes it depends on who we're able to get locked up and how long they're out of the community as well, especially in terms of property crime. We find that one of the challenges that we've had lately is that people aren't held in custody for very long. So even when our officers arrest them, I don't want to say that, by the time paperwork is done, they're basically back out on the road. But we're seeing that we're not able to hold as many people in custody, and that's definitely impacting how people come back into the community as quickly as they are as well. Part of what we're doing for property crime as well is the prevention methods, right? So, we have Jill talking about lock it or lose it. We're working with our media agencies to get the message out to be able to get people to secure their properties. And what we're really finding lately is number of break and enters have really reduced over the past couple of years, which is a much higher weighted hours. A lot of that is also related to COVID. People are home, so nobody breaks into the house when people are home. But what we're seeing now are different targets. So people are going after the snowmobile trailers with the sleds inside. People are going after businesses after hours, or businesses even during hours, just because there aren't as many people there. So we're shifting our focus a little bit too with how we're going to have to address that, and to be able to not just put more messaging out, but be able to work with our partners to be able to make sure that people are securing their items as well. In terms of violent crime, it's that's where we really work with our community partners to try to get people access to services, whether it's mental health related or whether it's domestic violence related. The other really large area that we saw an increase in is other threats to person. And I think that's where we're seeing that tension build in the community, especially as people don't have the outlets that they once had. So hopefully we'll see, with things reopening, hopefully on February 1st, we'll see people be able to have some of those outlets again that will be able to support some alternative activities for people to take place, and where they're not going to be cooped up as much. It's always interesting. They say, once you retire and you actually start spending all your time with your spouse, you realize that maybe you don't like each other as much as you did when you had 10 hours away every day. And I think we're sort of seeing that play out currently, where, with the added stresses of the kids being at home and not in school, with the added stress of two people working from home, and add into that the financial impact that so many people have had, it's really impacting people's mental health, and we're seeing that fall out into calls for service for us. So that's just sort of what we're seeing, and it's not just in Perth County. We're seeing across the board throughout West Region, throughout the province, that these are the types of calls for service that we're really starting to notice more in our community. And so that's why we need to continue to work with our community safety wellbeing plan, our community partners, to make sure people have that other outlets and other supports to be able to prevent calls for service to us and to bring it more to our community partners.
Thank you. I was not questioning the number of calls for service. The board will have to justify the increase, and probably Chair Steve will be the one that tries to justify why it has increased. So thought maybe I should ask. Thank you.
I just have a follow-up comment to June's question, because it's a very valid one. When we look at the November numbers as an example, and I just happen to have it on my other screen, calls for service, and I know it's a very sophisticated modeling when it comes to billing. I understand that, and I'm not trying to simplify it too much. But in 2021, We had 372 calls for service in 2020, as we've talked about with COVID. We have 261 calls for service. Going back to 2019, we had 317. I'm assuming that when you do a billing model, you take those and you do a weighted average. So in reality, if you take the spike of 2021 with the lower of 2020 and the medium point of 2019, we're going to end up having kind of a flat line. Taking those three numbers, adding them together and dividing it, I end up with an average of 316, which is on par with our benchmark of 2019 of 317. So although I hear you, June, and I'm not sure how sophisticated the modeling of as it relates to billing actually happens, but I'd also like to think that we're going to look at a 3-year kind of weighted average and get some benefit back to us a little bit in having fewer calls for service than projected back in 2020. That's what I'd like to think anyway.
It's only part of the formula used, Paul, as you well know. We've been down this road more than once, so it is only part of it, but it does affect it.
Okay. Great questions, and those are really good responses too. And yeah, just to go over what Jason said there, sure, when the community grows by a couple of hundred homes every few years, you know, we've got more people, so there's, you know, law of averages says you're going to have a few more calls. So all those are understandable, and I appreciate those good answers. Thanks very much. Does anyone else have any questions before we ask for a motion to accept those reports? All right.
Sorry, Councillor, I just have a couple things that I might bring to the board's attention.
Sure.
So just wanted to let you know that we've got 3 new recruits that are going to be starting with us on February 7th. So that's a good news story for us. So they'll be fresh out of police college and starting with us. And then we've been told that we're going to be having 2 more arriving in July. So that will bring us back to our numbers for staffing. So with that, some of the changes that we're doing is that we're going to fill our community safety officer position. So the person that's normally in that is on parental leave. So we've got a call of interest in for that. So that's going to be an extra person that will be able to support community related initiatives and community responses. One of the other things that we've done, and if you've had a chance to look at the Auditor General's report on the OPP service, one of the things they talk about is our scheduling. So what we're doing to try to counteract that is we started with a early car. So a car coming in between either at 1500 or 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the afternoon to cover off our peak calls for service. So our peak calls for service in West Perth occur between sort of 8 a.m. to about 10 p.m. So now we're bringing in an extra car to help us out with that. It also helps us out with that end of shift overtime that we talk about sometimes. So, you know, you get your call at 5 o'clock and now you're working on it until 7 or 8 o'clock at night. This early car will be able to support us with being able to free up that person to actually leave at their end of duty time. And that early car can take that call for service at the end of shift. And we've got our answer program, as you've heard about. One of the other things that actually Jason has taken the lead on, is doing a great job, is a transfer of care protocol with our local hospitals. This transfer of care protocol is to allow us to free up our officers from the hospital earlier. So when we take somebody in that's experiencing a mental health crisis, we'll work with the hospital to be able to get them seen quicker, which will be able to free our officers to get back on the road and handling calls for service. So that's something that we started, and Jason's taken the lead on it with working with our local healthcare service providers in conjunction with MCERT to be able to finish that off. And the other thing that we've just started to implement is we're having what we're calling an all zones car, basically. So one of the things that we're doing is having a car that will be dedicated to community response and community initiatives. So whether that is traffic or whether that is if we're seeing thefts from vehicles in that area, putting that car into that area during the evenings when it's happening, and really being able to focus in on different areas. So that is the other thing that we've been able to do now that we've got a few more people that have come into our county to be able to work. So, and the last part that I wanted to talk about is one of the focuses that we're having in the next little bit is really working on increasing our visibility within the community. So that's whether that's focus patrols, foot patrols, getting, now the schools are back in, getting our officers doing school patrols as well. So that's one of the main focuses that we've got going on, and that I've been meeting with our officers and our platoons about making sure that we've got that visibility out in our communities. So, and yeah, those are the things I just wanted to update you on about some of the changes that we've been making.
Thank you. That's great. Good news stories there.
Exactly.
Any comments or questions for any of that from anyone? No? Alrighty. Ask for a motion to accept the reports as presented. Motion by Paul, seconded by June. All in favor? Thank you. That's carried. We'll move on to item number 8 or 8.1, which is the accounts under the financial reports. Everybody has had that for a bit. Is there anything anybody wants to say about the financial report? Any problems, questions, anything to be reviewed? Crickets. Oh, yes, go ahead, June, please.
On the report, and I don't know what line it is, I guess it's 2060. It says EHT. What is that an acronym?
That's June. I'll answer through you, Chair. That's the employment health tax. It's one of the
Okay.
mandatory employment related costs.
I just didn't know what the acronym was. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff. I would have had to Google that. Okay, if there's no other questions, I'll ask for someone to make a motion to accept the financial report as presented. Thank you, John. Is there a seconder for that? Paul, thank you. All in favor? Very good. That's carried. Thank you. Slip down to item number 9, which is other business. Police Services Board operating budget verbal update by Jeff Brick.
Actually, I've got Dan attending the call and he's going to do that. And I just had to grab him because I think he got called to the, oh, there he is. Good, perfect.
Sure.
So
Thanks,
we got Dan. He knows more about it than I do. So we're going to have him speak.
Good morning, everyone. Has everyone had a chance to look at the budget, or would everyone like me to screen share and put it up? I'm going to take the silence that you've seen it. So I will just give a quick highlight and then I'll leave it to you, Chair, for questions. I do want to speak that we've brought down some revenue for police services, and a lot of that's coming from the provincial offenses court transfer. It's really a guessing game for us, but we've brought that down just with the impacts of COVID, and we're anticipating a little bit less money coming in from that revenue line item. From there, we have some increases in the expense side, largely on the contract side with the OPP, which we've already discussed. And we are showing the Safe Communities program expense now in this budget. It is money in, money out. You'll note that we have the revenue side of that coming in, but it wasn't being tracked in this budget, and best practice is to show that in this budget as money in, money out. So that's kind of what's really driving the expenses there. You'll note there's actually been quite a few cuts. Anything in brackets is in a cut side on the expense. So I know it's showing a net increase, but we are trimming things. We've kept the police service board budget from a salary and CPP and EHT, just the norm, the status quo. We're not sure, as anyone is, unless someone can correct me otherwise, on when the new act will get proclamation and be enforced. So we're just planning to business as usual. We've left mileage in again, hoping that maybe COVID and things will change. And we've just been getting rid of miscellaneous expenses across the board in the municipality. Additionally, you'll note in bylaw, we have moved to a bylaw contract. We're going to be having a contractor conduct bylaw enforcement for the municipality. This is about a 50% increase on the budget. That being said, that the budget that was there was not a true representation of what we were paying for bylaw services. It was salary only, and it wasn't taking in any additional costs. This budget that you're seeing now is an all-in, and I think you'll note we'll get quite a bit more service from this model. Animal control as well, we've really just kind of held the line. We will have a small increase with the Humane Society, and that's per just inflation. And for dog tags, they are in lifetime dog tag now, so we're seeing less expenses there, as we don't have to buy more every year and change the year, and et cetera, et cetera. And we have no capital plans. So with that, I'll open it up to the chair, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Thanks, Dan. That was a good overview of everything. Does anyone have comments or questions on it? Looks like you're maybe getting off easy. All right. Thanks very much for that, Dan. I believe we just received that as information. I don't think we have to do anything else with it, correct? Item 9.2, June.
Yes, I had a call from Rob. As we know, he was our inspector. He wanted to thank the board for inviting him to be the inspector for Perth County, because we were one of the instruments in bringing him here. He also wanted to say that he did enjoy his time in Perth County, and wanted everyone to know that he had handed in his retirement resignation as of the 24th of December, and wasn't back to say thank you for helping him through and all that we did for him, as well as what he did for us. So that was a phone call a week and a half ago.
Thanks, June. That's very nice. I don't believe we have anything for closed session. Our next meeting will be on March 23rd at 9 a.m. unless it needs to be changed for any reason. Before we go to adjournment, is there anything else anybody wants to say? Seeing nothing, I believe that's it for today. If we could have a motion for adjournment, please. Walter, thank you. John is a second. Thank you very much. All in favor? Carried. That's it.